From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Noory. Welcome to Coast AM. Later on tonight, ETs and spirituality. Well, we've got lots going on right now. The last communication received from a Malaysia Airlines plane suggests everything was normal on board minutes before it went missing over the South China Sea. Flight 370 replied, "All right, roger that," to a radio message from Malaysian Air Control. The search has been widened now to waters off both sides of the peninsula, and moments ago a Chinese satellite probing the mysterious disappearance of the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 claimed that observed a suspected crash area at the sea. The Chinese government said that a pivotal lead into what thus far has been a frustrating, fruitless search. However, Malaysians are saying that they have looked at that spot. Vietnam has looked at that spot, and they see no plane debris. So the plot thickens and continues to be a mystery. In a moment, David Soucie joins us as we will talk about his work, Why Planes Crash. But we don't know if this one did crash, but he'll join us for a bit in just a few moments. And welcome back to Coast. David Soucie, born in 1959 in Boulder, Colorado. He grew up in Arvada, Colorado, and has traveled the world extensively, improving safety awareness. He worked in the cockpit, on the hangar floor, within the aviation boardroom, and inside Washington, D.C.'s Beltway. He's seen death up close and personal as well. David, thanks for joining us at this late notice. And, of course, your book, Why Planes Crash, is being read right now in, I think, record numbers. I want your take, David, on this Malaysian Airlines flight. I mean, everybody's come up with their own theories, but what do you think's going on here?
Well, first, thanks for having me on here tonight. And it seems to me that the more we talk about this and the more I find out about it, the less I know. I'll tell you, I've never felt so helpless in my life.
It's weird. It really is strange.
It sure is. It sure is. And, you know, I was just looking at this thing about that they found some debris out there with the satellite, and I was trying to find it on our own satellite systems ourselves, but there's just nothing there now that was there before.
And they just came out and said, well, it looks like there's nothing to it.
Yeah. Which concerns me a little bit, you know, for a number of reasons, but because it looks like there legitimately was something there that morning after, and then now it's not. So I'm curious. It's pretty shallow water, though. They still should be able to pick it up. So I don't know. It's got to be so difficult on those families and people waiting to hear. But when we keep coming up with these theories, and then it looks good and then it looks bad, I can only imagine what they're going through.
Let me ask you this. Would pilots that are in a locked cockpit open the cockpit door if somebody with some kind of knife or other object might be holding passengers at bay, threatening to kill them?
No, I don't think that would ever happen. I mean, that's the purpose of having that door lockable and defensible the way that it is. And pilots are trained in that, specifically psychologically trained to handle that type of a situation. So I really don't see that happening. The only possibility of breaching the cockpit at this point is when one of the pilots, has to leave the cockpit to go use the restroom or decides to take a stretch and get something to eat. During that time, the cockpit door is locked behind them. The flight attendants will put a cart or something in between the front seats and the cockpit door while that occurs. So it's very safe and secure exchange of people moving in and out. There has been one occasion when that happened and the pilot left the cockpit, the door was locked behind him, and then the other pilot had a mental breakdown inside and took control of the aircraft by himself. So there's that possibility, but I don't carry a lot of stock in that possibility right now, though, because at the time that the aircraft went off of radar, it was during a transition time from the Vietnam airspace into another country's airspace. So during that time, it requires two pilots, so I really seriously doubt that one of those pilots would decide to get up at that time and leave the cockpit and open that door and make it vulnerable.
Well, let's talk about also, David, some of the inconsistencies here associated with this. First of all, and we're getting a little scratchy line from you. We might have to reconnect, but I'm not sure it's your fault. We've been having some AT&T issues of late. But the fact that the plane veered off course, I mean, by 100 miles at least, what does that tell you?
Well, it can mean a lot of different things. When something catastrophic happens on board the aircraft, you only have two pilots, and that cockpit gets extremely busy trying to just keep that airplane flying. So that demands all the attention. People have asked me, why wouldn't they have made a distress call? Why wouldn't they have said something? But when something dramatic happens, the first thing you do is maintain control of that aircraft. So if something happened to distract them, take their attention away, the last thing in their mind is calling and saying, hey, we're having a distress situation here right now. The first thing they're going to do is stabilize the aircraft and then make those calls. So it appears to me that something happened to make them veer off course. It doesn't look like an intentional move. It didn't go directly 20 degrees and then 30 degrees and then 40. It went kind of into 20 for a while and then went into a 40-degree alteration in the course before losing contact with the transponders.
Let me ask you about the transponders now. Obviously, at this point, I'm speculating that somebody physically shut those transponders off.
But, that's the way it looks to me. If you look at the alternative to that, which would be that there was some kind of massive electrical failure on board the aircraft that caused all the electricity, all the communications, everything to go out on that aircraft, it's highly unlikely. This aircraft has triple redundancy, meaning that it has 3 different electrical buses, off of which any of the electrical systems can run off of either one of those 3. Then it also has 3 generators, which are feeding those buses, and they can be altered as well. So one generator can run all 3, 2 can run 3. The configuration in this aircraft is extremely complex, and it's very, very reliable. Let's say all of that failed, there's still another generator that's a ram air generator that can be deployed into the air, and it'll create enough electricity to run the engines, run the communications, and the navigation equipment. So I really don't see, in my mind, that there's even a remote possibility that all the electrical system failed on that aircraft at one time.
Is it unusual that they haven't picked up the beacon sound yet?
Yes, extremely unusual, and that's my biggest concern at this point. It's, it wasn't uncommon for that to happen in the old emergency alert locator transmitters, which were broadcasting at 121 megahertz, 121.5. Their reliability was only about 53% when an aircraft would go down. They since then have upgraded to 243 megahertz, and now the current ones, which this aircraft had on it, is broadcasting at 400 megahertz. So there's 2 of these on the aircraft. The front one is activated by impact or by being jarred.
Yeah. Land or water, right?
Well, the front one is only land. It's only being jarred. But the second one, but it is waterproof, so it should be transmitting just from being jarred. The one in the rear not only activates from being jarred, but it also activates when salt water touches it. So that's the one that really concerns me. So if the aircraft was ditched and sunk, that ELT should be putting out a signal.
All right, let's make a couple more assumptions here, David. That a bomb went off in the cargo bay, maybe it was put in a suitcase and it got through security. Would the plane, if something like that exploded, and we of course don't know if it did or how big it would have been, but would the plane have traveled 100 miles that way, or would it have gone right down?
Well, first of all, if that happened, which I don't think happened, but if it did happen, then we would have an in-flight breakup. And in my experience with in-flight breakups, that spreads debris over miles. It can be miles. So you're 35,000 feet, and you can only imagine each one of those pieces of debris would become its own aerodynamic force, and they lay out in the path of flight. So you would have debris scattered across the ocean, and it would stand out like a sore thumb with all the search and rescue and satellites that we have going on.
But you wouldn't track a plane for 100 miles, right, at that point?
Well, no. If that happened, it would be pretty much directly below or within maybe 10 miles of where the impact actually occurred.
I'm beginning to think that this plane has landed somewhere, David. I don't know, but I just think there's something strange here.
I'm a factual person. I've always done investigations only based on what I know and what facts I have. But I got to admit, I feel hopeful about that. I don't know what it is that's inside of me that's telling me, because it all points to something else. But just inside my head, I keep thinking, God, wouldn't that be just something? It would answer a lot of questions that we have. It would answer a lot of questions.
Well, and here's another part of the puzzle. Terrorists love publicity. They love to brag about their deeds. Nothing's happened here.
No. And that's why, again, I don't see that as a potential. There was a FBI specialist, I forgot his name, the other day that I was interviewing with, and he said, that he didn't seem too concerned about that. He thought that this is a typical behavior for terrorists. I said, well, how's that? And he said that, after our response to bin Laden and to 911 and all those issues that happened, because we were so aggressive about going after them, that they wouldn't have, that maybe now they're not as so proud of it and not saying it out loud as to who it is because of fear of being attacked. And I said, well, why would they do it in the first place then? That theory didn't make sense to me. If they're trying to invoke terror, then they would obviously be trying to take credit for it. So I'm not sure I buy that argument. So I don't know. I just keep going back and forth, and I'm not this kind of person. I've been doing accident investigations a long time, and I'm, without sounding patting on my back, but I'm pretty darn good at it, and this has got me baffled completely.
Would you? Yeah, I would say that in your career, this has got to be one of the strangest cases ever. And I'm wondering what's going on now in the rooms of the FAA as they try to piecemeal in their own minds what happened with the folks at Malaysia Airlines and everything else. I'm just wondering if they have some information they're not passing on to us, David. Is that possible?
Well, that's happened to me a couple of times on investigations. For example, Flight 800. When there's a credible security risk of some kind, the FBI, and this is within the United States, but the FBI, NSA, there's a lot of organizations that can say, hey, this is not in the best interest for everybody to know what's going on yet. There's mixed emotions with me about that, but during an investigation, it's never wise to put out a lot of information that's conflicting, because you're making assumptions, you're trying to explore those assumptions, and all it does is create, especially for people who are waiting to hear the fate of their family member, the last thing you want to do is give them hope or take away hope when it's not necessary. So, there's reasons to not share with the public what's going on, and not that it's intentional even most of the time. It's just that you're so darn busy. When I've done accident investigations, you work 24/7s until it's done, pretty much. You're napping on, rolled up pieces of insulation in the hangar because you can't go any further.
A Boeing 777. It's a pretty darn safe aircraft. I know a lot of people who work at Boeing. They love this jet. Could the tail have fallen off?
There was only one of those there's actually two, I think, that have occurred, but those were both Airbus aircraft. This tail is not mounted in a phenolic block like some of the other aircraft manufacturers do to try to save weight. This tail is completely sound structure. The only thing that gives me pause at all is that repair to the wing that had been accomplished before a while back and had been repaired properly, supposedly.